about being alone in the mountains is that every sound becomes significant. That's what the rangers tell you during safety briefings. To stay alert, to trust your instincts. But they never tell you what to do when those instincts are screaming that you're being hunted. I'd been planning this solo camping trip for months. 3 days in the Cascade Mountains, just me, my gear, and the wilderness. I chose a remote spot about 6 miles from the nearest marked trail in a small clearing surrounded by pines, far enough out that you could pretend you were the last person on Earth. Looking back, that was my first mistake. By sunset, I had my camp set up, a small one-person tent, my gear stored carefully inside, bear spray within easy reach. The evening passed peacefully as I watched the stars emerge, one by one, until the sky was saturated with light. Around 11, I crawled into my sleeping bag, listening to the gentle whisper of wind through the trees. The footsteps started at midnight. I know because I checked my watch when I first heard them. Soft, deliberate steps crunching through the pine needles somewhere in the darkness beyond my tent. At first I assumed it was wildlife, maybe a deer or even a bear investigating the campsite. But there was something wrong about the rhythm. Too regular, too purposeful. They moved slowly, circling my tent at a distance of maybe 20 feet. "Hello?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is someone there?" The footsteps stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was absolute. No wind, no insects, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Then they started again, and faster this time. The circle tightening. "I have bear spray!" I shouted, my voice cracking. "If you're lost, I can help you, but you need to identify yourself." The response was immediate. The footsteps broke into a run, circling my tent with increasing speed. I could hear heavy breathing now and the distinct sound of something metal scraping against fabric. Maybe a knife or tool being drawn. Then came a sound that still wakes me up at night. A low chuckle, followed by footsteps approaching my tent directly. The blade came without warning, slicing through the tent sidewall just inches from my face. Through the gap, I caught a glimpse of a gloved hand wielding what looked like a hunting knife. Pure instinct took over. I launched myself at the opposite wall of the tent, tearing through it with desperate strength. The cool night air hit my face as I scrambled out, not even bothering to grab my shoes or flashlight. I ran blindly through the darkness, branches whipping across my face, rocks cutting into my sock-covered feet. Behind me, I could hear my pursuer crashing through the underbrush, no longer trying to be stealthy, just charging forward with determined speed. The worst part was hearing them communicate. 2 distant voices calling to each other as they tried to cut off my escape routes. They knew these woods. They'd planned this. I don't know how long I ran before the forest thinned and I stumbled down a steep embankment. The impact knocked the wind out of me, but I forced myself up, certain that if I stopped moving, I would die. When I finally stumbled onto the main trail, my feet were bleeding and my pajamas were in shreds. The trail marker's reflective surface caught the moonlight like a beacon of salvation. Behind me, I heard one final exchange between the pursuers. Then the sound of retreat as a car engine started up somewhere in the distance. Park rangers found my campsite the next day. The tent was slashed apart, not just where I'd escaped, but methodically cut to ribbons. My gear was scattered across the clearing, and anything valuable, my camera, GPS, wallet, was gone. But what disturbed the rangers most was the evidence that these people had been watching me. They found cigarette butts and boot prints in a hidden vantage point overlooking my campsite. The prints matched a string of similar incidents across 3 state parks, all targeting solo campers, all in remote locations. The investigation revealed even more disturbing details. My campsite wasn't chosen at random. The rangers found smaller marks on trees leading to my location, the kind hunters sometimes use to mark trails. Someone had scouted this spot, planned this attack, and waited for the right victim. I still go camping sometimes, but never alone, and never in those mountains. I've since learned that there's an unofficial network of solo hikers who warn each other about suspicious activity on the trails. They've documented dozens of similar incidents. People being stalked, camps being ransacked, hikers being chased through the darkness. Last month, I read about 2 arrests in the area. The police caught a pair of brothers who'd been terrorizing campers across 3 states. In their cabin, they found a collection of stolen camping gear, maps marked with potential targets, and, most chilling of all, a folder of photos. Pictures of campers taken without their knowledge, including one of me setting up my tent on that terrible night. The thing that haunts me most isn't the close call with the knife or the terror of being chased through the dark. It's knowing that they watched me for hours before making their move. Every time I go into the woods now, I can't shake the feeling of being watched. Because sometimes, the most dangerous predators in the forest walk on 2 legs. I used to love camping. The fresh pine scent of the forest, the crackle of campfires, the way the stars seemed to burn brighter away from the city lights. But after what happened at Lake Stillwater 3 years ago, I can't even look at a tent without feeling my throat tighten. My dad and I had found this remote campground online. One of those places that doesn't show up on most maps, the kind locals keep to themselves. The website had only 3 photos, a pristine lake reflecting snow-capped mountains, a dense forest trail, and a distant waterfall that seemed to emerge from the clouds themselves. We arrived late afternoon on a Tuesday in July. The campground was nearly empty. Just 2 other sites occupied far from ours. The camp host, an elderly man with leather-like skin and cloudy eyes, had warned us about the trails. Stay on the marked paths, he said, his voice carrying an edge I didn't understand then. The forest gets confused after sunset. Dad laughed it off as local color, the kind of thing old-timers say to tourists. We set up camp quickly, eager to explore the trail to the waterfall before dusk. The path started innocently enough, winding along the lake shore through towering pines that filtered the sunlight into gentle green shadows. About a mile in, we found the first thing that felt wrong. A slash pile. One of those heaps of cleared brush and branches that forestry services sometimes make. But this one was different. Perched carefully on top, as if placed there deliberately, was a small pink and white sneaker. Size 6, children's. Still relatively clean, its laces tied in a perfect bow. Probably just dropped by a hiker, Dad said, but he didn't sound convinced. We both knew that slash piles were usually deep in maintenance areas, not along tourist trails. The sun was getting lower, painting the lake in shades of amber when we reached the clearing. It was a perfect circle, maybe 30 feet across, as if the trees had deliberately grown around this space. Dad needed a bathroom break, so we did what people do in the woods, stood at opposite edges facing away from each other. That's when we heard it. I'm over here. The voice was high and clear, unmistakably a child's. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, as if the clearing itself was speaking. Dad spun around. Was that you trying to be funny? I shook my head, my mouth too dry to speak. We spent the next half hour searching the clearing and surrounding woods, calling out to whoever might be there. Our voices echoed back to us, mockingly empty. The forest had grown eerily still. No birds, no insects, not even the usual whisper of wind through the leaves. "We should head back," Dad finally said, his voice tight with an anxiety I'd never heard before. "It'll be dark soon." We hadn't gone 50 feet when we heard the first snap of a twig behind us. Then another, and another, matching our pace, but always just out of sight in the growing shadows. Sometimes we'd hear rustling in the bushes to our left, then immediately to our right, as if something was moving faster than humanly possible. Dad grabbed my arm, his grip painfully tight. "Don't run," he whispered. "Just walk." The shadows grew closer as darkness crept through the forest. Whatever was following us seemed to grow bolder with the fading light. A branch would shake violently just feet away. Pine needles would crunch right behind us. Once, I swear I felt something cold brush against my neck. When we finally broke through to the campground, the sound stopped abruptly. The camp host was standing by his trailer, watching us with those cloudy eyes. He didn't seem surprised to see us running from the darkness. We packed up that night, using our headlights to find our gear. As we drove away, I looked in the side mirror and saw something that still haunts my dreams. A small figure standing at the trailhead, barely visible in our taillights, wearing one pink and white sneaker. Dad and I never talked about what happened. We donated our camping gear to Goodwill and found new hobbies that kept us in the sunlight, away from forests and their shadows. But sometimes, on quiet nights, I'll wake up to the sound of a child's voice saying, "I'm over here." And for a moment, I'll smell pine needles and feel that cold brush against my neck. Last week, I got curious and looked up Lake Stillwater online. The website is gone now, replaced by a simple page listing missing persons cases from the area. Each entry shows a date, a name, and an age. Most of them are children. And at the bottom of the page, there's a photo of a familiar slash pile with a pink and white sneaker, size 6, placed carefully on top. This happened to me last summer while I was solo camping in northern Ontario. I'm an experienced outdoorsman and have been doing solo canoe trips through the provincial parks for years. But nothing could have prepared me for what I encountered on day 3 of my trip. The morning had started normally enough. I broke camp at around 7 a.m., packed my gear into my canoe, and started paddling across Lake Manitou. It was one of those perfect northern mornings. Glassy water, light mist rising off the surface, and that deep silence you only get when you're miles from civilization. I'd been paddling for about 2 hours when I saw it. At first, it was just a shape on a partially submerged rock near the shoreline, maybe 50 yards ahead. As I got closer, my brain started piecing together what I was looking at. Pale skin, dark hair, and a woman's body sprawled face down across the rock like a discarded mannequin. My paddle froze mid-stroke. In that moment, the silence of the lake became something oppressive. All I could hear was my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. I've never seen a dead body before, but something about the way she was positioned, limbs splayed out unnaturally, half in the water, made my stomach turn. She was wearing what looked like hunting clothes, and she couldn't have been more than 25. I knew I had to check. The nearest ranger station was at least a day's paddle away, and if there was even a slight chance she was alive. I started moving closer, my hands shaking on the paddle. "Hello?" My voice sounded weak, swallowed up by the vastness of the lake. No response. I tried again, louder this time.
Hey! Are you okay?
Still nothing. I was about 20 yards away now, close enough to see her hair moving slightly in the breeze. My mind was racing with possibilities. Had she fallen? Was she attacked? How long had she been out here? Who would choose to sleep on a half-submerged rock in the middle of nowhere? And that's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Her hand was twitching.
Miss, can you hear me?
Suddenly, her head snapped up. I nearly capsized my canoe trying to backpaddle. She looked around, confused, then focused on me, with the sort of embarrassed surprise you'd expect from someone who fell asleep on a bus and missed their stop. Turns out she was part of a group camping on a nearby island. She'd gone for an early morning swim, found this warm rock to sunbathe on, and fallen asleep. She had no idea how long she'd been there. I helped her get oriented and pointed her back toward her campsite. She was apologetic, clearly embarrassed about the whole thing. We laughed it off, and I continued on my way. But here's the thing. It's been over a year, and I still can't shake those 5 minutes when I thought I was looking at a corpse. Sometimes when I'm falling asleep, my mind replays the image of her lying there, and I imagine a different ending to the story. One where she doesn't lift her head. One where I have to spend a day paddling back to civilization with the knowledge of what I found on that rock. I still go camping up north, and still do solo trips. But now I find myself counting the rocks as I paddle by, checking each one just in case. Because for 5 minutes, I genuinely thought I was living through the opening scene of a horror movie. And I'm not sure I'll ever fully shake that feeling.